No, you on Zoom you can always rename yourself and become completely anonymous. That's the benefit of Zoom. So, but anyway, so yeah, so my name is Aneta Rostkowska. I'm the director of Center for Contemporary Art, Temporary Gallery in Cologne, and I'm really happy to be here today with all our great guests and all of you. This event is a part of a long-term project we are working on, dedicated to different forms of kinship, different forms of intimacies, and critique of nuclear family, and yeah, different ways of bonding with the world and with other people. We conduct this year as so-called study group, which is a sequence of online meetings. And next year there will be an exhibition at Temporary Gallery in Cologne, opening in February, beginning of February until the end of April, and a publication, a book. And here I would like to introduce my collaborator, very important person for this project, Chris Dietel, who is an independent curator based in Rotterdam. I had the pleasure of studying with her, curating with her in Amsterdam for almost a year. And that's how our friendship developed. And Chris is a fellow of Temporary Gallery this year, thanks to a very nice fellowship program of Medienwerk NRW. We could work with her, and will continue next year. And Chris will tell you a little bit more about the study group. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Aneta, and thank you everyone for joining. We started this study group with the idea as a way to open our thinking process and our research process around the notions of kinship and its various possibilities, and to even consider the viability of this term. Is kinship actually the relevant terminology for us to use? What other forms of collective coexistence exist out there, or what could we imagine that exist outside of the nuclear family structure and its various alterations, basically structures that kind of exist outside of property relations and the social reproduction of norms, so to say. And also this series came out of the idea and our interest in practices of collective learning and sharing and contemplating life organized differently. And this is our 8th event in the series. There is several topics that we explored so far. For example, we had an event on ancestral spirits with curator Kanisia Mubongwa and researcher and healer Dicena Lozwane. Or we had a reading group with Bini Adamczak on the topic of the polysexual economy. We also had a seminar on the social and economic history of the family with Professor Miyu from the University of Kassel Documenta Institute. We also had a talk with Sophie Lewis on family abolition and its decolonial perspective, and so on. As Aneta mentioned, there is a recording of some of these events on Temporary Gallery's YouTube channel. And before I introduce our guests and the event today, I would like just to invite you also to our next event that will take place on the 13th of December, next week. And it is also the last of this series. It will be a talk with Karina Kotova and Barbara Ciprova, who are curators from the Jindřich Chalupecký Society in Prague, an organization whom we are also partnering in this project. Their talk will be on the feminist contradictions of parenting, and it will explore some of the stands and propositions on parenting and child rearing from a feminist theory and fiction, psychological and anthropological literature. So you are very welcome to join also next week. And to turn to our guests and even today, we are accompanied by Francisco Trento, who I think is joining us from Brazil tonight. and they will introduce their research on the stigmatization of neurodiversity within online dating platforms and show us a zine prototype that they've been working on. Francisco Trento, who uses they them pronouns, is an artistic researcher living in Helsinki, Finland. They are a researcher at the Uni Arts at Helsinki, and they are also social responsibility coordinator at Frame Contemporary Art Finland. Francisco holds a PhD in communication and semiotics in media studies, and they are interested in institutional critique, anti-ableism, neurodiversity, non-dyadic modes of togetherness, and neuroqueerness. And I think we will hear about this terminology and their meaning in the coming minutes, hour. And so now, Francisco, I would like to give you the word, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation and joining us today.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really nice to be with all of you. I hope you can hear me well. I'm in this Airbnb co-working space, which is a bit strange, as you've seen by the artifacts around. But yeah, so I guess we can start. I'm gonna share my presentation. Just a second. Okay. Can you see? Yes, right? Okay. I'm just trying to remove this zoom thing from the top of the slide, but okay, maybe it's gonna stay here. Okay, so this is the title of my presentation, and it's Neuroqueer Intimacies and Navigating Non-Neurotypical Togetherness. So a little bit about me. I was born in 1987 in Brazil. I use the pronouns they, them, or hen in Finnish, which is the gender neutral pronoun. Finnish language doesn't have gender, actually, and so it's the only pronoun. I'm a researcher on neurodiversity and arts education at Uni Arts Helsinki, where I live already 4 years, since the beginning of 2019, so almost 4 years actually. I'm currently in Brazil for 2 months, in São Paulo. I also develop research on Neuroqueer Intimacies, and I'm also a social responsibility coordinator at Frame Contemporary Art Finland. So that's where where I also met Anetta and Chris when we had a meeting in a Islands of Kinship project in Bratislava. I'm a neuroqueer or neurodivergent person, an artistic researcher. Yeah. Just some trigger warnings about this. It's not, I have to say, there's not much, but it's always good to signalize just in case. So this is actually a work in progress. It's something that it's actually not my main research. My main research is about academic ableism, and I have been developing that at Uni Arts Helsinki, basically in the context of arts education since 2019. And so I work at Uni Arts Helsinki 50% of my time, and at Frame Contemporary Art 40%, which leaves me 10% of time to work with this. So I have to say that's a very slow. It was very, very slow process, and it's also in the beginning. So I'm sure it's filled with a lot of contradictions and gaps. But it's something that came to my mind when I was doing a residency in the Fortress Island in the southern Finland near Öland. and it was the beginning of the pandemics, and there was this several discussions about care, both in mainstream media, but also in the academia. Well, the care discussions come very earlier than that, but at that time it was quite exacerbated, and I was worried about neoliberal and individual definitions of care that was adopted by both conservative and allegedly progressive societal groups. This research is both based in lived experience and academic literature, but I'm not a specialist in this. As I said, my main research and my main work is on it's also about neurodiversity, but it's more connected to academic ableism. So I have to say that the experiences that I describe for sure are not universal. And at the moment, it looks like more like a gathering or compilation of references to a project that I'm currently writing, and also like that has been crystallizing in the form of this zine that I'm going to talk about soon. So this I'd say that's my current conceptual network on this. I guess there's somebody in the waiting room. Could somebody let them in? Yeah, okay. So it's quite overwhelming, but this is currently my conceptual network. So I guess my main reference, both in all my research, has been Remi Yergeau's discussion on neuroqueerness, and Remi emerges from the queer and critical disability studies, but also the rhetoric studies, and they criticize the model of rhetorics that has been accepted and employed by both academia and societal institutions, and or like the rhetoric that is ableist, and it refers to the so-called good communication skills that everybody, or not everybody, but we know that it means that you need to behave in a certain way that not all bodies attuned to. So, and also connected to the queer studies, which actually is something that Remi takes on as the Queers in Utopia from Jose Esteban Munoz. So, but I recently have been connecting with the care studies and non and anti-monogamy studies that also discuss the right to care, or the right to intimacy in its many forms, both all kinds of intimacy, not only sexual, but all modalities of care. And I have been discussing that through my main reference for years on that is Undoing Monogamy from Angela Willey, but also recently I came into contact with Sophie Lewis' Abolish the Family and The Right to Sex by Amia Srinivasan. And so these are some things that connect. And I have been writing this article for this Culture Unbound journal. It's going back and forth for 2 years, but it's going to be published in a few months now, and it's about stigmatization of neurodivergent intimacies in the discourses in dating apps. So, and from that, I also take the perspective of Remi Yergeau, who did research on stigmatization of neuroqueer traits, and through this some sort of fake disease that has been spread in some message boards, which is the Cassandra affective disorder. So that's also really important for my research. And so in a way, all these things connect, because also like I started to think like first, how do we make, can we live in a society that guarantees that everybody has care? or in its all possible forms, but considering that some people do not fit the mainstream criteria of desirability, and that is connected pretty much with the ableist constraints of society. So in a way, while diving in the non and anti-monogamy studies, I found out many interesting things about this. And also, this is something that came to me a few weeks ago, but it's Lola Olufemi, a fabulatory work on how to live together, which is also connected to anti-work perspectives. So yeah, sorry about this very long description of this messy board, but that's, yeah. Okay, how do I change? Okay, so so I used there is some terminology discussion, neurodivergent or neurodiverse. I use the term neuroqueer as a synonym from neurodivergent, and neuroqueerness as a synonym from neurodiversity. But neurodiversity refers to the spectrum of cognitive atypicality, while neurodivergent points to a particular person in the spectrum, but one can also say neurodiverse. There is not a consensus about all these terms. There's good discussions that say the term neurodivergent may be not adequate or so. So it just because it assumes that there is a standardized model of cognition, and if something diverges, it diverges from a desirable norm. However, on the other hand, it has been appropriated by activists as a stance against normalcy. Sorry, I'm just gonna remove this Zoom menu from my slide because it's bothering me a bit. Okay, so it has been appropriated by activists as a stance against normalcy, and there are several definitions of what encompasses neurodiversity. And there is discussions of the broad understanding of neurodiversity, or the more strict understanding of neurodiversity. Understand that in the beginning, or in the 90s, there was the term neurodiverse was coined, and at first it was connected more to autistic communities, and it was in message boards and online groups, and then later it started to embrace other non-typical modalities of being, like persons with ADHD and other conditions, and also there is a discussion if neurodiversity should include or not this so-called there is this discussion on the high and low functioning, which I don't like the terms actually when referring to autistic subjects, but so I myself use neurodiversity in a more broad way, which encompasses people who do not attune to the norms of cognitive typicality, which means people who are normal, or in a way, and of course, this doesn't have anything to do with the way that the person looks like, but because we're talking also about invisible disabilities, or things that people do not recognize in you, and that's actually a discussion I'm gonna have quite soon. So so neurodiversity is an activist movement and paradigm. It has been circulating in the past decades in online message boards about autism. And I have to say, this is a particular understanding. The neurodiversity movement defines some mental health conditions, like DSD, spectrum, ADHD, and others, not as deficits, but as expressions of human variability, which means that neurodiversity fits the social mode of disability, which aims to undo the ableism in society, by adapting it to differently abled persons, not labeling disabled bodies as defective. So the neurodiversity movement is intersectional, or at least it should be. Many neurodivergent folks are queer and do not identify with binary genders, contrary to the fringe theories that define autism as a male brain condition. So by ableism basically builds this divide between able and disabled people. So by the social model of disability encompasses that this divide is artificial, and well, everything is artificial, but this divide is artificial, and there should be a vouch for development of societal institutions that could be adapted to all kinds of bodies and not just the normative bodies or embodied minds, actually. So what do I mean by neuroqueerness? And this I take a lot from Remi Yergeau's work, but is the queer positionality of being neurodivergent and the intersection between gender, sexual queerness, and non-neurotypical conditions. Authors that use the term neuroqueerness affirm that neurodivergent bodies are re-evaluated and recategorized continuously by the normative society, as they eventually seem as too neurodivergent to perform the tasks of daily and work life, but at the same time not neurodivergent enough to qualify for welfare health benefits. This is something particularly in Finland. For instance, if you need some assistance, I'd say that from the public service, they start to assist you once you are not cannot attune to the work rhythm. So if you cannot work well, then they start to assist you, but otherwise they say that you're fine and you shouldn't be in the QE for a special or for some form of care connected to, and I've been into that system. So because I am autistic, but I'm read as a functional person for work because I deliver outputs. So in a way, the system evaluates that I do not need the care because I can continue working, which is, and I understand that. Yeah, and I'm talking about Finland, who has a good healthcare, but not very good mental healthcare, I have to say. So this comes from Remi Yergeau, author in Autism on Neurological Queerness. So this, the idea of neuroqueerness is connected to the Zeno paradox, which means that as an autistic or neurodivergent subject, you are always being moved from one side to another because the way people understand your traits can shift quite much. So there is like this continuum or this line or this arrow, and you're constantly being moved. So sometimes you look quite too normal, and then you're kind of categorized as human, but sometimes people understand that you do not look normal enough, and you're then categorized on the other pole, which is the non-human. But the thing is that you're always being moved. You don't have a ground, and that so it's and they call that crypt teleportation, which is yeah. So, and that's also connected to rhetoricity. So basically, in their book, they criticize the understanding of rhetoricity, that rhetorics is this full communication skills, and I'm gonna go back to the so-called communication skills when I'm talking about dating and dating apps and stigmatization. But basically, in some situations, you're when you're talking with somebody, and when I'm talking with somebody, and they say, "Oh, but you don't look autistic. You look so normal because you can communicate, you can do everything, you can express yourself." But on other situations, they say, "Well, I can see that you are autistic because you cannot express yourself." And while what Yergeau criticizes is this understanding of rhetorics that's connected only with this spoken and written language, which attunes to a system of how do I say, system of norms. So if you can communicate in a way, then you are understood as rhetorical being. But if you cannot, then you cannot. And the thing is that the same person sometimes communicate in a way and sometimes not. I mean, as an autistic person, I realize that sometimes I fail in language. I'm not saying failing as a bad thing, actually, but which means that I cannot explain myself through language sometimes, but sometimes I can. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Actually, I think that's some potential from the understanding of neuroqueerness. So Yergeau goes to Jose Esteban Muñoz's understanding of queerness, which is this constant movement or being moved, and the non-attunement to the hetero-futurist family. And they say that there is some parallels between this constantly being moved by the diagnosis or the evaluations people do with you all the time in work environments or in dating life. So this position of not having a ground is this queerness. But of course, the ground sometimes, I mean, it's necessary for me. But also, one aspect of the neuroqueerness is that the understanding of I tried to change the slide, but did it go? Oh, okay. So basically, the behavioral sciences have categorized. This is also from Remi Yergeau's book. Have categorized autism as a male brain disorder, and while other conditions as female brain disorders. And it's like this kind of understanding that people who are, and if you look into the representation of autistics in the media, it's always going to be this white male heterosexual and desexualized person. And there is a very good article on that, which our author's surname is Matthews. I can share later, but and the author is called Why Sheldon Cooper Can't Be Black, and it actually criticizes that persons of color in the US are less diagnosed as autistics because the traits are not evaluated as being part of the autistic as autistic, but it's like this eugenist and racist idea that Black people have this misbehavior. And the same applies to women who are underdiagnosed, not the same, but other stigmatizations are applied to women who are not enough diagnosed because there is this discussion that or this other conditions are more to the feminine so-called brain, and this kind of behavioral theory is completely outdated. But if you understand, but the ABA, which is the main behavioral so-called treatment for autism, is still quite based on this kind of neurosexist divide. So this is actually a compilation of characteristics that Yergeau has compiled in their book. And I have to say that one of the characteristics, both of them have characteristics that will lead to stigmatization in the care, intimacy, and dating life, which is this idea that first is connected to other conditions, but some people are destroyers of sociality and relationships, sociopathic. This is more connected to the so-called feminine side, from the masculine side. This non-human sociality, a sociality of things, or sociality of one. And this kind of very outdated theory is still present in nowadays in many aspects of discourse, and even in so-called progressive groups that vouch for care on the internet. So I know many transphobic environments, online environments, use this kind of arguments still nowadays. So both actually the transphobic and the conservative people are again together in this understanding, as they are in many others. So one thing about dating as a neurodivergent person, and that's more connected to the form of intimacy that I research, is that even when a neurodivergent person is engaged in romantic relationships, they can face loneliness because of the incessant masking they perform to be tolerated by the neurotypical partners. And here, tolerated is the word. Actually, I hate this word, but in this case, is what the partners often do. So what happens is that people have to mask so much their traits to be accepted that they feel that they are not, and they are not being themselves. So actually, it is a relationship, but you still feel alone, but because you cannot be basically how you are, how you really are. You cannot display your traits. Of course, it's not possible to hide them completely, but this actually eats your emotional energy, basically, because you have to constantly mask. So this I took from this article. I later I can share how the bibliography. And masking, well, for those who don't know what is masking, masking, camouflaging, or passing can include cautious and unconscious attempt to hide autistic behaviors and use of techniques to appear socially competent, such as rehearsing facial expressions, eye contact, and social scripts. And I have been doing that a lot in my entire life, but at some point I decided to stop doing it. But of course, that has a cost in my life. But anyways, so in this article that was published also by Remi Yergeau in 2020, they had examined the discourse that described this so-called Cassandra affective deprivation disorder, which is a non-existent condition discussed in online message boards. So CAD would be a relational condition in which an autistic person purposely deprives their non-autistic partner of love and affection. And it would be referred to the suffering of a partner or somebody in the spectrum of autism may engage with due to the supposed coldness and egoism this individuals possess. And according to the people who advocate for that, if one engages in a neuroqueer relationship, one eventually be subject to these effects. But it's an ableist discursive device that justifies itself by affirming that women's oppression is intensified when contact with the presumed intensive masculinity of neurodivergent subjects. So in a way, this artificial condition that was created or in online forums, and actually in the so-called feminist online forums, actually, but more like trans-exclusionary feminist radical trans-exclusionary feminism forums, they actually affirm that if you are basically dating an autistic person, it's always gonna go back into that into that table that I shared before, that autistic persons always have this masculine characteristics, and what does it even mean? I mean, but they understand quite they have a quite essentialist understanding that if you are dating an autistic person, that person is going to deprive you and it's going to explore you, because they have this intensive masculinity, or whatever that means to them. And so it reinforces actually that divide that erases people in the spectrum of autism that actually are queer and non-binary, and actually mostly and also erases even actually both cis and trans women in the spectrum, because they still reinforce the behavioral understandings of autism from the 60s that put this autism as this male condition. So it's just yeah. And also there is this rejection of the weirdness propagated by the CDD advocates. And Yergeau affirms that an invisible destruction when set into motion by the figuration of autistics as inherently asexual, loveless, and unteachable, as abusers who present no affection or tactile expression whatsoever, and those deprived neurotypicals of intimacy and sanity. So that's, and of course, this image is reinforced by the representation of neurodivergent subjects as desexualized white males in mainstream television and film. So I get, again, that article on why Sheldon, which is called Why Sheldon Cooper Can't Be Black, it's quite, it also touches on this, because discusses this character from that TV series, The Big Bang Theory, as the prototype of the autistic to mainstream media and mainstream understandings of what it means to be neurodivergent, which is like this white male genius that do not want to engage in intimacy with anybody. And actually, that's how many people think about people who are neurodivergent, not only autistics, but people with other non-typical ways of being. And also, there is also the gestural aspect, because autistics and neurodivergent subjects also, they perform ways of looking or not looking into each other's eyes, which deviate from the standards of rhetoric and common sense knowledge, which regarding eye contact as a form of trust building or a form of, so I always say I used to say, at least, that even if I don't look into your eyes, I'm still interested in you. But I think people have really hard time understanding that, because there is this grammatics of togetherness that are quite normative still. Well, there's an important distinction that neuroqueer people are often desexualized in the media and in this public discourse, which is not the same as being asexual. Asexuality is part of human sexuality, while this is natural, while this desexualization is a discursivity that connects to this understanding of also the mainstream understanding of desirability. And why are some bodies sexualized and other desexualized? This is a question which, of course, needs to be done in an intersectional way, connecting not only invisible disabilities, but race, ethnicity, and other age and other how could I say, other categories of being alive. I don't know what, but in relationships between neurodivergent and neurotypical individuals, the lack of empathy emerges as a trope pointed towards always to the non-typical node of a romantic relationship. And this was discussed by this author, which is Damien Milton, the problematization of this lack of empathy. I cannot remember exactly the term they use, but they discussed that it's not that there is a lack of empathy, but actually there is two modes of feeling and perceiving each other, and these modes are different, but they also cultural understandings of the world, or two ways of worldly, but doesn't mean that the way of being there performed by neurodivergent people is a lack. It's just a question of the translationability between these two modes, and there is and I need to dive into that article more, but there is like this, because I'm not bringing the concepts now, but what it means is that there is two modes of expression in this relationship, one neurotypical and one neurodivergent. Usually what I experience is that only the neurotypical node doesn't want or feel that it's too much effort to try to understand how this other mode of being, other mode of expressing and perceiving empathy is. So it's kind of so yeah. And this stigmatization attunes, of course, to a neoliberal discursive regime that favors individuality disguised as self and mutual care, stimulating other peers to avoid sharing moments of intimacy with quick bodies, and fosters a project of standardization of human interpersonal relationships, as if there is alleged contagiousness of the lack of productivity of desired intimate relationship. So, and there are other forms of desexualization of neurodivergent subjects, which are connected to persons who are disabled, queer, and kinky, for instance. And this paragraph from the Handbook of Consensual Monogamy by Alex, and this chapter by Alex Ian Taffy discusses that, which is this type of desexualization is about divesting us disabled people of our own sexual agency and identities by viewing any expression of queerness, kinkiness, or similar sexual deviances as a way of adapting to disability rather than a legitimate identities. This means that in some people's perception, we are queer and or kinky because we are not capable of engaging with cis heteronormative standards of sex. So I started to dive in some of these intersections recently, which is in this article called Comforting, Reassuring, and Hot, a qualitative exploration of engaging in BDSM and kink from the perspective of autistic adults. The researchers and Amy Persons and Sophie Hodgetts discusses these intersections between neuroqueerness and quinkness. It's not a widely studied topic, and while it's a preprint, the study brings some thoughts, and they affirm that contrary to the stereotyped image of neuroqueer person, sex and BDSM may serve as a focus passion for neuroqueer people. While that was not a surprise for me, there are some other correlations that caught my attention, and they're not universal. I have to say, I do not identify with many of them, with some, yes, but of course, there's diversity within diversity. I think we need to understand that. So again, I have to say this is not a universal experience, and the communication styles of kink and BDSM and autistic people are well aligned. Directness, being explicit, which can also help non-autistic and non-kinky people to learn how to communicate about their own boundaries more explicitly and openly. And masking is exhausting for autistic people, and being forced to unmask in a safe environment provided a place to truly relax and let go within built reassurance that participants could truly be themselves and be accepted for who they are at their most vulnerable. And overall, kink BDSM providing a sense of certainty, safety, and openness that's not present in vanilla intimacy. Also, yes, actually, there is discussion about, for instance, I think it's connected to that discussion of scheduling or non-scheduling sex and intimacy. And I think scheduling can be comforting for some people who need tight schedules. And sometimes, I mean, I like contingency and I like not scheduling, but sometimes I also like scheduling, because I think for many people in the spectrum, it's good to know how your day is going to be, so you can continue the day. But so I think yes, it's an interesting discussion actually. And another, intersectionalizing the necessity of play and attune the social sensory pleasure and experience in a playful way. So several participants discussed how participating in BDSM and or kink had provided them opportunities to have their sensory needs fulfilled and experience sensory joy. And also BDSM and kink provided a unique opportunity to experience physical sensations like touch and pain, and engage with specific textures like the use of fabrics in the BDSM and kink-related clothes and props that they knew would bring sensory joy. So in a way, there's also like this certainty of what could be used in that determinate situation of kinkiness is also reassuring, because there are some, for many people in the spectrum are quite sensitive for some materials and like different kinds of materials. So once you're in that controlled environment, you know what you're going to touch or what you're not going to touch. I think I have not thought about that, but I think it's a really interesting discussion actually. And also, for instance, many people in the spectrum, they use these steam toys, or they are always playing with some thingies, and this kind of gesture is always seen as problematic or by neurotypical or like normative people. And I feel that I think that's also a form of intimacy, not necessarily sexual intimacy, but like when I engage with some toy, I think I am being intimate with them, with this non-human creature that I'm touching. So also it's like one way of understanding why our notions of intimacy are just mostly connected to sex, while there is a broader understanding of intimacy possible. So now we move a bit to neuroqueerness, dating, and anti-monogamy. So I go to Angela Willey's book, and Willey discusses a bit also this figure of the white autistic male, which became the mainstream or archetype for the person in the spectrum of autism. So according to Willey, the discourses that posit monogamy and non-monogamy as natural to human sociality collect processes the reduction of biology. So there's always this saying that both monogamy and non-monogamy are natural, like how this species is monogamic and this species is non-monogamic, and blah, blah, blah. While they don't understand that both these understandings of living together are social and historical constructs that were built not very much long time ago, actually. And also, on the other hand, many religious systems of belief, especially in the global north, and say like mostly Christian based, postulate God's desire for persons to maintain the same partner as long as they used to live. So that's another form of crystallization of monogamy. But against this discursivities really proposes that against monogamy and non-monogamy, one must become anti-monogamous and embrace modes of togetherness that diverge from this pair. So, for instance, the scientific discourses that build an idea that a relationship is based on coupledom, and coupledom, therefore, is tied to genital sex. So, really discusses the researchers made with voles, and in the voles, in the controlled environments of the laboratory, it was defined that partnership would be defined by the number of copulations of a male and a female. And while that's something analyzed in the context of particular species of voles, the discourses that center the sexual partnership as the core of one's life are present in westernized notions of family and community. And relations outside this core are often deprioritized. And here she discusses a bit about how asexuality, which is a natural part of the spectrum of sexuality, was also stigmatized and tied to autism. And she says that asexuality is the target deficit associated with autism, is at the heart of reproduction of monogamous nature in contemporary genetics. Asociality is also emerging in science and popular cultures in ways that are marked by both masculinity and whiteness. And while this really describes the new autistic subject represented in popular culture as somebody who can be reclaimed as quirky, as lovable through the lens of sex-ed brain theories of autism. So it's basically the crystallization of this idea that the person in the spectrum is this white male, which is, I'd say, not asexual, but desexualized, because asexuality is a natural part of all human variability. But so basically, and the lovability, and therefore that character should be not did not fit the criteria of desirability, and therefore could not fit into this candidate for the coupledom that would last for the entire life. This is a vole. For those who know, I think I saw the first. I think I saw one in many in Finland, and they are quite cute. So these are the subjects that were studied in the research she analyzed. So then, how can we build communities that contemplate radical difference, including people in the spectrum of neurodiversity and all modalities of neurodiversities? And I see that there are many discussions on the creation of non-monogamic communities, but often they fail. They tend to fail and fit into this discourse that a person is going to be a burden for the community, and therefore they should not be accepted in that community, and they are stigmatized within these communities as well. As disabled people in consensual non-monogamic relationships need to deal with ableism, not only the partner larger communities and potentially their partners, but also their partners' partners. For those who don't know, like, there's this idea of access intimacy from activist and academic Mia Mingus and disability activist, and they say that basically access intimacy is when you need people around you they start to know all your needs, or basically needs that deviate from the basic needs of a normal person. And by that I mean needs of care, different working shifts, different ways of traveling, different ways, necessities of textures, and these things, since they're not there for us, if we don't ask, then people end up having access to or access intimacy. And there is a lot of stigmatization, and people understand that that's a burden, basically, mostly neurotypical people. And how can we live together, considering that not everybody fits into the neoliberal constraint of work and performativity? How can we take appropriate care of themselves if they have the capacity to engage in paid work only for 10 hours per week, or no paid work at all? Nurture their well-being could include the reaching out financial support to their partners and are applying for disability benefits. So these things can be seen in a broader loving or non-monogamic community as a burden for this community. And I think that's also quite connected to the anti-work movement, or so basically not all bodies can work 8 or 8 hours or 7 hours per day. And what can we cannot basically ask everybody to give the same contribution in a community but because bodies are different, not all bodies can attune to the same working load and receive the same salary, therefore. And also these bodies may need care that is more expensive, because basically there is scarcity in availability of resources for visibly and invisible disabled people. So in a way, how can we build a community that accommodate us and other disabled people, a community of intimacy? So these questions of these criteria of desirability are many of the questions that propelled this zine that I have been doing, which is the nder-bender. So this zine was a zine on Neuroqueer Intimacies. It was funded by UrbanApa in Finland. UrbanApa is an organization in Finland. Funds some residencies, and this was a home residence I made for a week. And I used as a materials text from my diary, where I discussed experiences of stigmatization in the dating scene as a neurodivergent person. And I collected text OTD bits of dating app ableist profile descriptions, which obviously are anonymized. And these were remixed, recomposed, and recomposed. So basically, I think that when you're applying to a job, at least in the Finnish context, but I have seen way worse actually than there is these requirements in every single of the open job calls that we are looking for somebody with very good communication skills and with interpersonal network capabilities and so on. And we know that actually that refers to a certain mode of being that only some bodies can attune to. And also with understanding of rhetoric, which is connected to this very good and very clear spoken and written language, which is very good in a way that it connects to the normative understanding of language, the verbal language, and so on. And of course, and of course, in the between the lines, you can say, oh, of course, when I read that, I said, oh, maybe I'm not gonna fit for that job, because only to mask that I'm capable of doing that, I would get sick. So, but the fun or not so fun thing is that these phrases started to appear also in dating apps profiles. Like, for instance, I want somebody with very communication skills, or I want somebody who has been doing therapy, which is okay. I think I do therapy, but I think what it means, it's in between the lines, is they want somebody who was went to therapy and was normatized and cannot bring many problems in question, emotional problems. And that's quite attuned to understanding of self-care, that okay, I take care of myself and you should take care of yours, and we are together, but I don't want this burden. And so yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about that. So this heterocentric and westernized models of family generate relational scarcity, because people do not get care because one is assigned to care only if they deserve it. And to deserve, you must display success, financial, beauty standards based, or able-bodiedness. And that's exactly what these discourses on this, both dating apps and open jobs, say. You need to have very good communication skills and interpersonal network skills, and be or to be a leader. When I read Lauren Berland's work on intimacy, it felt very good, because Laura said we are stuck in a Victorian idea of intimacy where the world is divided by uncontrollable private space, affective spaces, and uncontrollable public instrumental spaces. So basically, I never understood how people could go to work, meet a bunch of people there, and then everybody says, "Oh, how are you? Are you feeling well?" Blah, blah, blah. But actually, there is no care beyond that, because then everybody goes home, and then it's where care happens, because all care should be allocated to that to the nuclear family, and so the problems in this environment should not leak into the other environment, which is a sacred environment of the coupledom, as if there were some two separate instances of reality in this world. And by care, I don't mean romantic or sexual environment, but any form of nourishing, chit-chatting, cuddling, hugging, kissing, touching, licking, going to groceries together, sitting on a bench, preparing food, or taking care when one is sick. So while this is a project which is strongly connected to complaining, I wanted to emphasize in this scene neuroqueer joy, just the fact. So why do I want to bend Tinder? I think first, intimacy and care need to be redistributed, understood as basic rights. And that came in, I think that idea was present in my mind for many, many years, but and I have been kind of reading about this. But last September, I attended this Strange Intimacies in the University in Trento, and I watched the presentation by Sveta Grigorieva, and she discussed this book, Solution 257, Complete Love by Ingo Nierman. And the book revolves about this idea of completism, which, according to Grigorieva, something akin to sexual preference of philosophy, like polyamory, but a social and political dimension. And completism problematizes how sex should be distributed and universalized as a basic right, like food, land, and access to health services. The completists are activists who freely facilitate sex to persons that do not fit the criteria of desirability, because persons visibly and invisibly disabled. And actually, this presentation was about Tinder, and it had a very critical approach towards the use of Tinder. Like Tinder fosters this, and I think I want to implode the system a bit more from inside, in a way that I think by making people like to think, I think it's impossible like just to ask people to change their desires, but like to think, why am I attracted to this person? What are the intersections connected to this, and what are the implications connected to this that are ableist and racist and ageist? So to have I think everybody should think about how our desire is constructed, basically, and why do we attract to this person, which doesn't mean that, I think if you're attracted to somebody and they're attracted to you, of course you can have fun and sex and love and care, but what I mean is that to question why is there this so narrow part of people who people want to engage with and have care. So Tinder is an environment where the evaluation of success and ability is enacted in full force. For me, actually, people experience social anxiety. Tinder helps a lot because going to network events in person can be stressful and make me suffer. And also Tinder reinforces rational scarcity. Some people do not get in a car because they are not assigned, only if they deserve. As I said before, you must display success, financial, beauty standards, or able-bodiedness. So, okay, and this is actually a screenshot from the zine. It's a prototype of the zine, so it's not going to be like this in print, but I put this Mulder and Scully because I think it's the only possible heterosexual couple in the world from the X-Files. But below Mulder and Scully, there is really interesting thoughts on the idea of affective inequalities, which is developed by this Finnish Mario Kolemainen from University of Turku, I guess. And they developed this, they have a really long research on affective inequalities, which try to identify these mechanisms that generate affective inequalities for some populations and scarcities from some populations, which are intersectional mechanisms of exclusion, basically. They have a book, I think it's called Affective Inequalities, which is really good, but also several articles on the topic. So why to bend Tinder again? So the strategies they developed to navigate through the app are personal and not universal. I cataloged expressions that made me avoid a profile like I want somebody with proper communication skills. This should be in parentheses or in quotation marks. As a long-time user of intimacy platforms, I learned how to decode profiles when the user describes themselves as socially awkward, praise, or weird, but they often retreat from conversation at first sight of a neuroqueer trait. So it's actually this also, it's not, the word is not fetishization because it's another thing, but something which is like, I want to look as, I want to look weird, but I don't want to look weird like a neurodivergent people, because that then is undesirable. And often weird is like a person, I go to a lot of parties and I drink a lot, but when weirdness is connected to some display of non-neurotypical traits and gestural or looking, then things start, then it's not acceptable anymore, because then it fits into other category. And also one usually understands communication and rhetoric as perfect and prompt English proficiency. And speaking from an embodied positionality as a neurodivergent subject, I often fail with language, even my mother tongue. As I pointed out, intimacy should not be limited to human interpersonal relationships, purely based on conversational skills. And there's also really interesting discussions going on about the modalities of consent that are verbal or non-verbal, for instance. So I started to write these anti-ableist letters answering some profiles. And the zine also prototype also includes fictional playful dating app profiles showing a joyful approach to more than human and neuroqueer approaches to intimacy, profiles that value and neurodivergent traits such as stimming, stuttering, being hypersensitive, and overwhelmed by textures, sounds and crowded environments. And I wrote fictional and non-fictional letters to the requirements of ableness required by the Tinder users. So for instance, I wrote, "Thank you for matching me. I noticed you mentioned in your profile they're looking for meeting somebody with very good communication skills. It's funny because I have been bumping into this phrase constantly in my job application calls. I understand that perhaps you're looking for somebody in the spectrum of neurotypicality that looks into everybody into other sides and that does not steam a stutter. That's quite specific. Let me tell you, I also have very specific desires. Every night I eat a can of pineapple tidbits it's not any pineapple, it must be a golden pineapple. I'm sending a picture of the can and the brand they usually buy, so you can also know about this very specific criteria of desirability of mine. I took the liberty to share it since you also have shared a very specific one of your. I also noticed you put in your profile that you go to therapy often. That's nice. I wish everybody could go to therapy if they want, but I don't think that's a financial reality. So that's one of the letters that I wrote. And then I started to write these other profiles, which are more connected to a more broader definition of intimacy, which is connected to this intimacy that suits my sensorial needs. So I wrote this profile about this person who was looking for this specific kind of rock from Sicily, which is quite soft, but also hard at the same time. You have this very many kind of holes, and it feels really very good to in my hand. Also this moss, which is also gentle to my touch. Also thinking about how our understandings of intimacy and touch and togetherness are quite tied to these two very human notions. And yeah. So there are more letters and also some screenshots of some bibliography that I collected. Yeah, this is something. These are some letters, and of course I can share the zine with you, so you can read them if you want. It's a zine prototype, so it's not final, and has some mistakes that need to be corrected, but I can share. And this okay. So I have some upcoming arts and research projects, and one of them is this Neuroqueer Intimacies project, which is like a project aiming to identify a mechanism of stigmatization of young adult neurodivergent folks in mobile dating apps, and propose a conceptualization of intimacy that evaluates neurodiversity, and analyze the stigmatization of neurodiversity affects the disclosure of invisible disabilities. Research conducted in Helsinki metro area and qualitative studies. Data would be collected through semi-structured interviews and surveys with 18 to 35-year-old Tinder app users, interdisciplinary framework of conceptual speed dating, neurodiversity and critical disability studies, of course, connected to the intimacy studies and media studies. Also, this is another project of mine which is connected to this. Which is a Cuddle Academy, which is a platform for complaint and care, which is an Instagram profile about non-normative modalities of intimacy and neurodiversity, academic and non-academic content. And the main principle is people should be able to posit their needs, of course, respecting trigger warnings and things that may offend others. But the idea is, how can we build a community where people can communicate their needs for all modalities of care, including sexual, affective, sensorial, and financial, understanding the asymmetrical and intersectional relations of power that are in play when you communicate this. The project is active, but it's at the same time a bit dormant because I engage with it in my office course free time. So these are a few screenshots from the Cuddling Academy. Yeah, you can also follow there. It's this Instagram, Cuddling Academy. So this is the question that I'd like to leave. How can we build a community, but something that endures beyond this meeting, beyond meetings, through time? Understand that neoliberal capital is a monster that eats time. If love is not scarce, but time is, how can we engage together against capitalism and build some mode of togetherness, or at least navigate understanding that different bodies have different necessities, and how can we put everything, how can we create communities where everything is given, all modalities of care can be fulfilled if the state is not capable of fulfilling us with these modalities of care. And okay, and you can contact me at this Instagram, Francisco Trento, or in this email, and I will create a folder with all the bibliographies I can share with you through email. I did not put here because I knew this will go to YouTube, and I'm not sure if there is some copyright restriction because these books are not free, so I can share with everybody. But I was afraid that if you put it on YouTube, they would take down the video. So yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Francisco. Thank you. It was really, really great and very, valuable perspective on these topics. I have many thoughts in my head, and I'm sure other participants as well. So now we have some time for discussion. So if you have any questions, you can, we are not such a big group, so I guess you can just speak, or you can write in the chat window as you prefer. And we are curious, let's share our thoughts on this. No one wants to start, as always. No, but do I understand it properly that you, Francisco, you take this term neurodiverse and neuroqueer, you understand it in a very broad way, and you don't want to make like a super fixed category out of that. So, for example, I guess if someone suffers from depression or schizophrenia, for you it's included, or or for example, if someone concerning sexual preferences is hetero, so to speak, this person can also, and for example, is suffers from depression, can also be neuroqueer. Just to make sure I understood what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are two sides of this. Like, for instance, I think there's, of course, many people in the spectrum actually identify as queer and both sexually and gender related. But I am a person who do not identify with binary pairs, but on the other hand, this understanding of queerness, of this position of always being moved from one identity from another, which is understanding of queerness that came from Munoz, and also like how the reappropriation queer in the past used to be referred to anybody who was kind of could not attune to this normal mode of being. So in a way, queerness is connected to the gender and sexuality, of course, but also it's connected to other how do I say, non-normative modes of being in life or living or expressing themselves. So and I think there is many definitions of neurodiversity movement. So and there is not a consensus on that. And it emerged as something more connected to the spectrum of autism and in some communities it's very strongly connected to that still. And even within autism, there are people who understand that neurodiversity would be only for so-called high functioning autistics, which are the autistics who we speak. So, and I myself, I attune more to understand of neurodiversity that encompasses other non-typical modes of being too as well. And there are authors that are also adopt this broader definition. So I'd say yes, but I'd say that not everybody would say yes. Okay, I'm not sure if this is clear. Yeah.
Maybe we should make a case for, like promote
there
our definition.
actually there are many actually discussions on that, and there's in the bibliography actually there's many authors that vouch for this broader definition. Yeah.
So, for example, Temporary Gallery regularly collaborates with Cat 18. It's a house in Cologne that hosts ateliers for artists with, and that's the question, neurodiverse artists. Like,
yeah,
I sometimes say mental disabilities, but I don't like kind of this term. Like there are people there who have very different backgrounds, situations, like people with Down syndrome, for example. Like, would you also? And recently, someone was writing about one of the projects we are doing, and they described this community there as neurodiverse community. So for you, it would be fine.
well, for me, yes, but
Okay, but not
I cannot say for everybody. Yeah.
But I think we are also on this way of reaching some kind of a different language that has a different conceptual framework that encompasses many thoughts that you just shared with us. So it's also, I think, important to kind of think about it and use these terms that have different connotations, of course, because they can also, change our thinking and so on. So it's good to make these things clear. Yeah, super.
Well, I think the thing with the main thing with the social or even the biosocial mode of disability is that they understand that these modes of being that do not attune to the norm, they are not necessarily, we need to avoid the discourse of it's a lack, because there's no lack or anything. It's just a mode of living that is different from this mode of living that we're attuning to typicality, and so like, yeah.
But I guess I think there should be also this consciousness that living with those modalities, sometimes it's very hard for the people. At least this is what I hear also from people that have these modalities, that on one hand they understand the necessity of a different language, but it should not also, the hardship of a life should not also disappear from the discourse, so to speak.
No. But it's not about.
Yeah.
It's not. Exactly. It's not about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have here Ina Alexandra is sharing an article in the chat window. Romantic love is killing us. So thank you very, very much. Any other questions or comments? Chris, I'm sure you have something. Our fellow.
Yeah, sure. Something, I don't know, I will try to formulate it as a question. So at this moment, it's rather a kind of collection of thoughts and reflections. Since you mentioned masking and thinking about neurodiversity in its kind of intersections. And I think, as you also talked about, it's rather well understood now or nowadays that these diagnostic protocols are very much gendered, and they're developed for a white male socialized individual. But I was wondering, apart from this article that you shared, why Sheldon Cooper can't be black, if there is maybe more research or literature on different vectors of power that go beyond gender, but as a disciplinary norm, but also look into race and class as well, like how they reinforce certain ways of masking, and then how these moments are not understood as such, and then becomes the kind of the weirdness, the kind of antisocialness, or whatever of the individual, because in my experience, within the diagnostic industrial complex, these tests are still, very much tied to a male socialized individual, because you are probably, there's all these like very stereotypical notions of how an individual responds to the world around them. And there are real influences how one responds to the world around them. And I wonder if you came across, I don't know, certain literature that also or research that actually deals with various modes of masking when one responds to these other vectors. I think I made a kind of big loop here, but I hope it does make sense.
Yeah, I'm thinking like, I think, for instance, there's somebody in the room. The question of the modalities of masking, I think it's also connected to other identity markers as well. Of course, not only neurodivergent people mask, but people that need to mask other identity categories as well to be accepted by this white male understanding of the norm. Of course, I think I'm not sure if I think I read very long time ago, but I need to come back. I think there is some Fred Moten discusses the intersection of neurodiversity and blackness. Although I don't remember he talks about masking, but I think it's there somewhere because as far as I remember, and of course these tests are based also in a Western understanding or like some Western semiotic of affects that you need to respond to this situation by showing this specific behavior. And of course, science is not apolitical or free from these asymmetrical relations of power. So of course, these things need to be contested, and they are, and they change. But so things that were not understood as, or things that were understood in the past as diseases, they are taken out of the thing. But of course, it is still very much, they are taken out of the catalog of medical conditions. And so this pathologizing discourse is based on this system of responses. You need to act in this way in response to this situation of whatever stress or pain or grief, and we know that these things are totally culturally built. The way we connect to grief can be, for instance, happy, joyful, can be sad, can be, but these effects are not apolitical or ahistorical. They change from one society to another. So there is like this standardization of Western societies that say, okay, we have this grammar of affects. You need to react this way to this, otherwise we're going to pathologize you. So we cannot address any of these things in a non-intersectional way. I think Jean Barry said about the Hickey dating app for autistic friendship and dating, and I know it, and I think it's I think it's an interesting idea, but on it, and I have tried it, but of course I'm in a very, very small country, which is Finland, and I did not find more than 5 or 6 people there, so I don't have much experience on it. But yeah, but I think it's, and also there's obviously other non-dating but online communities where people can be together, of course. But yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments? If not, I think we are approaching end of our meeting. But yeah, we have a comment from Dagmar. Thank you. Let's all join the Cuddling Academy. That would be a good outcome.
I think for me, like, the idea of is that I am very I never understood why people should not be able to communicate their needs. And I'm not talking about only sex, care, and romantic, but also like other modalities of care. And I know there's many interesting initiatives in the CREEP community. Like, for instance, in Helsinki, there are like this care network in Facebook where people say, okay, can somebody do groceries for me, because I'm not, I cannot do today. My body is not, my body doesn't allow me to do today, or like, can somebody go to the bank with me or something, or like some situations that can be very difficult, can be very stressful for a body, and bodies are always changing. Like, I think that's one of the things that with the positionality being always changed, that while I can try to mask, there are some situations where, or some days in which I cannot mask and I cannot do certain tasks. So how can we build a community where we can help each other? And I think that, for instance, in the official institutions, that's kind of impossible, like in the university or in the, because they say, okay, no, you should go to we have a therapist and we have a, or like we have this person, and then you solve that with them, but do not contact other people or whatever. So it's like this sanitized environment where care is a taboo, cannot be discussed, even though there are these studies of care about etc., like reading groups and etc. But outside that, the network cannot be built, or it can be, but of course outside somehow in the scope. So I guess it's kind of a the idea of that profile is like, how do can we say what are our necessities of care, but also like to talk a bit about the bibliography on this neurodiversity and modes of togetherness that are not typical, and so yeah, I think like
maybe you could paste your email address again in the chat window in case someone wants to write you.
As well the link to the prototype of the zine before get.
Because it's my own drive. I don't know if I can do it now, but
don't worry. We can also maybe share it and
maybe is it okay if I share with you and then you share it? Because I think it's going to take a while for me to figure out this, to put somewhere else.
Also, we can post it underneath in the YouTube description.
Okay, that could work for sure. And
you mean the email address?
Yeah, I can share the bibliography
and the link to the zine.
Maybe I think I will create a Dropbox folder, or does that work for you? Or
yes, the Dropbox folder.
Yeah, with the zine, I think if you want to be accessible, it would be interesting, Actually, I was wondering, this kind of intervention in the space of Tinder would be possible, where you have like, fictitious profiles or that are, like in a different style a bit, it's a kind of a spontaneous idea.
I mean, of course, I think I tried
like
that. But
campaign, you did that.
I tried that, but I think the problem is that these platforms are owned by corporations that do not like much of that. and they end up deleting you. So even like when I talk about some things on the Cuddling Academy or my own profile, it's like if it involves some sex or something, the publication doesn't get visibility, or even sometimes they can block your profile. I went to this, there was this thing that I went to Tampere in Finland. It's a city, and then I took a picture in front of a place which was it was a sex shop, and it was not connected to that, but because there was word sex on the wall, they blocked my Instagram profile for 3 days. So, and it was not even about that. It was another thing. So I think we are kind of running against this algorithms. So that's also the problem of how can we invent something there with the limitations that they have. It's difficult. So
yeah, they would need to kind of agree to that. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, and Francisco, and I just wanted to say that if you want to follow this project, you can order a newsletter of Temporary Gallery. It's on our website, because there will be, I think, several longer gatherings next year. And we were thinking with Chris, we were thinking about some names like Festival of Feelings, or I
very
heard
spontaneous.
modeled on Eat, Pray, Love. You know, this book and this movie, like Eat, Eat, Cuddle, Love, Fuck.
There was a lot. It was a long title.
And love.
There was a lot.
Yeah, that's
so we are thinking
interesting
about
project for sure.
gatherings where we can spend some time together at Temporary Gallery in Cologne and have some food together and with some interesting contributions. And repeat.
Yeah.
Repeatedly, yes. Thank you.
I hope I visit you in 2023.
Yes, we would be delighted.
Within our project. Anyways, yeah.
And Chris, you wanted to say something about events next week, or?
I already did, but please,
did.
on the 13th of December, join us for the next and last session of the study group, and it will be on the feminist contradictions of parenting with two curators from the Jindřich Lupecki Society in Prague.
Yes. And if you are in Cologne, we will also have a finissage of our current free exhibitions next week on Saturday, and it will have also a lot of music and good drinks. So if you want to spend a nice evening on Saturday, you can also come to Temporary Gallery. Okay. So I will stop.
And I will share the Dropbox soon. I need to sometime